Speaker, one of the most basic functions of this government is to ensure our youngest members of society can receive a world-class education and the very best start in life. But this obligation means nothing if a child's access to school is determined by their postcode. The conversation for metropolitan families about how their children will get to and from school in the morning and afternoon is made much easier by the wide availability of transport options and educational institutions. But for rural parents, getting a child to school or preschool is a constant calculation of time, cost and safety. And for those living on isolated rural properties or in small villages, the school bus is often the only practical option. This conversation is especially important today as concerns about fuel availability ripple throughout rural Australia. Services such as school buses have never been more vital to rural families amid high cost of living pressures. These pressures are being felt most acutely in the increasing challenges to access bus services for preschool-aged children. More and more, operators are reviewing their policies for transporting school-aged children, citing safety obligations, regulatory requirements and operational risks. Concerns about supervision, emergency procedures and the requirement for children to be signed in and out of early learning services have led some operators to withdraw or restrict these services. I acknowledge that these decisions are being made with safety in mind, and I don't blame the operators who have made those tough calls, but there is no denying this has an impact on families. For those living many kilometres from the nearest town, these challenges have meant hours on the road, increased fuel costs and time taken away from work, farming responsibilities and family life. Rural parents structure their employment around school transport availability. When that transport becomes unreliable or unavailable, it can mean reduced working hours, lost income, or the difficult decision to step away from employment altogether. And it's a responsibility which disproportionately affects rural women. But the impacts extend beyond individual households. School bus services play a critical role in sustaining small rural schools and the communities that surround them. When transport services are reduced or withdrawn, enrolments can fall, placing additional pressure on already vulnerable schools and the towns that depend on them. We're seeing the consequences of this in the Cootamundra electorate today, with some bus routes, such as that to Nangus Public School, only guaranteed until the end of this year. Children growing up in rural and regional New South Wales should not face additional barriers to education simply because of where they live. Yet when transport options are limited, when preschool access becomes more difficult, or when families must weigh the rising cost of fuel against the cost of participation, those barriers become very real. It is becoming more difficult by the day for families who are having to drive their children to school because of the current fuel affordability and availability crisis. Additionally, I have been actively contacting school bus services across the Cootamundra electorate, and several operators are concerned about their ability to guarantee next week's fuel supply. So I'm urging the government today to do what it can now to ease the burden on families who have no other choice but to drive their children to school with some relief, such as increasing the school drive subsidy and expanding the eligibility to include preschool children. The government can also end the requirement for school buses to run when not required, such as on pupil-free days and during school holidays. And in the longer term, it is imperative to the educational outcomes of rural students and the flexibility of working families that we investigate solutions and review school bus routes to ensure that every child in this state can access quality education via the school bus.